Hello and welcome to today's Microsoft Teams Week webinar. My name is Ella and I'm delighted to be joined by Carmen today, who'll be speaking to you about building beautiful team apps, Teams UI Toolkit for makers. Remember to join the conversation about today's webinar on Twitter. Our Twitter handle is @EuropeanSP and our hashtag is ESPC21. Don't forget to check out the Resource Centre. The Resource Centre is updated daily with the latest blogs, ebooks and webinars. Simply visit sharepointeurope.com/resource centre. We'd like to thank our Microsoft Teams Week supporter Veeam for supporting us for this exciting week. You have the chance to win one of two €100 Amazon gift vouchers with Veeam's competition. You can win by submitting your registration details on the link provided on the screen or by scanning the QR code. The first winner will be randomly selected from Veeam's webinar on Thursday from Veeam's webinar attendees. The second winner will be selected from anyone who's attended a webinar this week. The winner will be contacted next week via email. We are also very excited to announce our 2-for-1 sale on ESPC 22 tickets happening tomorrow. This sale will run on 4-day tickets. To find out more, simply visit sharepointeurope.com/ESPC22 2-for-1 sale. Tomorrow, our webinar will be all about feedback connections, so join us at 11 AM CET. After the webinar presentation, we will have a question and answer session. Type any questions you may have into the question window. This webinar will be recorded and you'll be notified by email once it is available. Now I'm going to pass you over to our webinar presenter, Carmen. Good afternoon, Carmen. How are you today?
Hi, good afternoon, Ella. I'm good, thank you.
Good. I can see your screen. Looks good.
Okay. So I guess I should just start, right?
Yeah, over to you.
Okay. Yep, cool. Okay, so hi everyone. Welcome on today's webinar where I will be talking about how you can build beautiful Teams applications that look like they are Teams native and made for Teams. And specifically, I will talk about how you can use the Teams UI Toolkit as a maker, building Canvas apps, building low-code applications, to make your applications look pretty, like the one in the background, which I will also mention later on. I'm Carmen. Let me go to the next slide. Yes, there we go. I'm Carmen. I'm a Power Platform architect and low-code developer at Cubix in Belgium. I'm a serial learner, so I constantly like to learn new things, and I also like to share what I learn on my blog, digipersonal.com, and on Twitter. And I have a cute, if I do say so myself, although I may be a little biased, I have a cute small dog, so I'm a dog mom, and you can also find pictures of her on Twitter occasionally. What I want to talk to you about today is how to build beautiful applications, apps that look like they were built for Teams, like this one, for example. This is, I believe, a Microsoft application, but it looks like it belongs in Microsoft Teams. It has look and feel, it just uses the same colors. It's beautiful. These are applications built for Microsoft Teams. Another one, the Viva Insights application, it just belongs. When you open it, you see that this application belongs in Teams. Now, us as app makers, specifically Canvas app makers, working with the Power Platform with low code, most of the applications that we build, yes, even me as an experienced developer, the first applications that I built looked like this, and the first version of an application that I build nowadays still looks like this. This is a typical Power Apps Canvas app. You can see that it is a Canvas app because it has the typical blue colors, the standard gallery with some changes, like the icon was changed and this number was added here. The typical sizes, the typical font is being used. This screams Canvas app, which is not a bad thing per se. I just don't like this that much. It's not beautiful. I would even dare to say that if you don't do anything about it, these are a bit ugly. And the same goes for a tablet application. This is a typical form with the scroll bar, and you can see that this is a Canvas app. If you have worked with Power Apps Canvas apps, then these applications are very recognizable for you. You notice all the controls, and it's just typical for a Canvas app. Now, when I'm building an application, I would like to, especially if I'm building an application for Teams, I would like to aim for something more like this, to go for a more beautiful application. And why should I care about that? Why should I care about what my application looks like? Why should I care about the fact whether or not my applications look like they are native, like they belong in Teams? And for me, those are three reasons why I care about that, and why I think you should care about that as well. The first thing is that beautiful applications will increase adoption. I am much more likely to use something that I like, something that is good looking. It's the same for mobile applications. If an application works well, but it's ugly, I'm less likely to use it. If it's beautiful and it's intuitive, that will help me to use it. If I have an application on an iPhone, on iOS, that uses very familiar icons, very familiar ways to interact with my phone as the rest of the phone does, I'm much more likely to use that than when it's just counterintuitive to everything else that I do on my phone. The same for an Android. If you are used to having the back button in the bottom right corner, it would be strange if it's suddenly in the top left corner. So if an application looks native, and that goes for mobile applications, but also for Teams applications, people are much more likely to use it. The second reason is to increase security, and this might sound a bit strange. What can the design of my application mean for security? Basically, these days, when we teach people about security, we usually say, if it doesn't feel right, it's probably not right. Meaning that if it seems like something's off, that's the same if you get an email and supposedly it's from your company, but it's completely different from the other emails that you usually get from your company, you should be suspicious. You should not click that link if there is a link in there, because it's probably not from your company. And the same should go for applications. If you are inside of Teams and all of the applications look more or less the same, and then there is this one application that uses different colors, a different font, different sizes, everything just seems wrong. I want to be able to tell people the same thing. If it feels wrong, it probably is, so don't use it. And therefore, if we make our applications fit into Teams, if we make it just one of the bunch, then people will feel more at ease using that. And they should feel more at ease using our applications that we provide to them as a company. And third, I want to make my colleagues happy or my customers happy. And we as humans, we like beautiful things. So if an application is beautiful, if it fits into the grand scheme of things, my people will be, or the colleagues or the people that I build an application for will be happier, and that in turn will again increase adoption, of course. Those are the three reasons why I care about native looking apps, and why I think you should care about that. And while I was preparing this session, I found a cool quote online that I wanted to share with you. And that is that UI design is successful when people want to use it. So saying that you can put as much design on top of your application as you want to, but it's only going to be successful when people want to use it. And in my opinion, at least, Microsoft Teams already has worked on their design. The Teams product group has worked on their design, and people are actually using that application. So when they work in Teams, some of the things will be familiar. I know that if there is a button in the typical Teams purple, which is usually nicknamed blurple, it's probably an important button. It's probably the main action that I want to click. So if I can use that same principle to my applications that I want to embed into Microsoft Teams, that's a win, because people don't need to think about it. It's just the same as it is in the rest of the application. And that will make it easier for people to use it, and therefore they will want to use it. And then our design is successful. But how do we get there? Because we start from this thing on the left, which is ugly, It's a typical Canvas app. We start from this and we want to get to, well, maybe not specifically this one, but something that just feels right. How do we get there? And that is what I'm going to give you an intro on today, where you can find resources. And I'm going to do that with three things. The first one is I'm going to introduce you to the Microsoft Teams UI Toolkit. If you hadn't heard about that already, we will take a look at it, where you can find it, how you can use it, what information is in there. And then we are going to look at an application, a demo application that I built, which is a typical Power Up, but with some modifications already. And we are going to extend that so that it actually fits into Teams perfectly. And then at the end, I will share some resources, and I will share the presentation later on, maybe through Ella, or maybe on my Twitter. We still have to figure that out, so that you can get started as well. That it's not, you don't have to refer back to this session, of course. So let's start by taking a look at the Microsoft Teams UI Toolkit. And for that, I'm going to open a browser. As you can see, I already had it open. But if you don't have the link directly yet, how do you get there? So if you Google or Bing search the Microsoft Teams UI Toolkit, then, well, this is strange. Normally this is in English and I get different links. So this is always, of course, good. Let me try this in the browser if this gives a different result, because this is the same. Okay, so I screwed up something right before the demo, of course. I didn't sacrifice anything to the demo gods. Luckily, I do have it open. There is a page on Microsoft Docs, which is included in the presentation, on how you can design your Microsoft Teams app with UI templates. And there is some information. There are tools. This is the toolkit. And there are also samples. There is a UI library. You can get it on GitHub if you're a pro developer. But as low-code developers, those components on GitHub, they don't really offer us that much, because we cannot simply import them into a Power App. So instead, we are going to go to the UI kit in Figma by clicking the link. And then you will come to this overview page, the Microsoft Teams UI kit. It's shared by Microsoft, but it's a community UI toolkit. And it takes some time to load, but then a preview will open here. And if you click duplicate, then you have to log into Figma, which I have done already. Let's wait a bit. Which I have done already. And then you get your own copy of the Microsoft Teams UI kit, in which you can click through to all of the details. So I recommend to duplicate this UI toolkit so that you have your own copy, and then you can click through it completely without being afraid that you messed anything up. I have done that already, so I'm not going to do that again. And I have it open here. So this is the Microsoft Teams UI kit. This is my personal copy of it. So if I accidentally make changes here, this will not be visible to everyone else. I can also still create a new copy if I delete something and I need to get it back. So you can do that. This is what you get after you click that duplicate button here in the top right corner. So taking a look at the Microsoft Teams UI kit, what is in there? Of course, we have the cover page, which is the same as there. And then here, if we open this drop down here with the cover page, you can see all of the information that is in there. So there is some general information, which is basically how to get started with the UI kit. And by default, Figma shows it in full screen, so you see everything, but you can zoom in, for which I'm using the control key and my mouse to do that right now. You can zoom in, and then you can navigate through it. You can see what is it about, what is included. Is it for me? If you have any part in creating a Teams app, yes, because that's why we're here. We want to build applications for Teams and we want to make them beautiful. So that's why we are here. Some design principles that the Teams team is using and that you should use in your application as well. And then some information about that sample library as well, how you can use it as a pro developer, where you can get more information, which font you will need, all of that, a changelog, what they have changed in their most recent versions. And then, so this is general information about the toolkit, and then we get into the actual content of the toolkit, which consists of 4 parts. First of all, we have the design system, which just gives you a high-level overview of what a Teams application should look like. What is a typical layout of an application? How does it work? We have a grid. There is a grid in Teams. I'm not going to go through everything in detail, but rather give you an overview of what is in there so that you can understand where to get started and what you need to know before you can get started. Information on avatars, which icons to use, and here they include a link to where you can find, let me see, there it is, to where you can find the Fluent icons which are used in Teams, and you can download them from there. Information about the font and the text size that is used in the type page. So you can see that Teams applications use 7 types of sizes, which are defined with a font size and then a line height, which is the space that you should have surrounding your lines, surrounding your text, and then what they are used for typically. When to use which font weight or which effect, if it should be italic. We are looking at web and desktop apps, so Segu UI will be our font to use, which is included in Power Apps or in Canvas Apps, so that's a good thing. And then also when to use what. So this is general guidance. All of these things are general guidance, general information that you will need before you can get started. The most important, I believe, are the type, the colors, and the shape and elevation. So colors, we're talking about which colors. What exactly is that hex value for the typical Teams blur pool? That is what we will need for a lot of things. Also, what other shades of gray can we use to have our other text or to have other buttons, not the main buttons, but the other ones, which are the typical shades of gray that are used. What are the secondary colors? All of that information you can find in the colors page. And then in shape and elevation, we are talking about the border radius. What is the border radius for Teams buttons? How do I make sure that my buttons don't stick out? How can I make that? And that is 4 pixels. So now you know that if you're creating a Teams button, the border radius is 4 pixels. So this is the design system. This provides you general information about your Teams application, about how you should design your Teams application. High-level things that will are relevant for all of the things, for all the other things that you're doing. Whether it's creating a form, whether it's creating a button to save a form, or it's creating that specific label inside of that form. This information is relevant to all of that. Here you will get that general information. Now, the next section that we have is app capabilities, which will tell you what kind of applications can I build. Now with Power Apps, we will focus on personal apps and tabs, and the one that I'm going to do is a personal app. But if you have any other things that you may want to do in a Power App, you can find that here. And then specifically what that should look like. What does my canvas look like, or what should my canvas include? How big is it? All of that information you can find in app capabilities. And then I'm going to skip the UI components and go first to the UI templates. So I have an application. I know which colors to use. I know which fonts to use, or which font, and the sizes for my different types of text. I have all of that general information somewhere. Now I want to start building things. I want to start putting things into my application. Maybe I want to have a form in my application. Then in the UI templates, I can go to the form page, and I can get some general information of what my form should look like. So I have a form. It's used to collect, validate, and submit user input. Yes, that's what I want to build. And I want it to look like this. Well, how do I know what this does? Because there is a lot on here. And then the thing that you can do is you can click through to all of these components. So let's say I want to know what is the weight and the size of my text here. So if I click a couple of times, usually you have to click in threes, which can be a bit strange in the beginning because I always expected it to be like 2 clicks, but that didn't get me there. So it's 3 clicks that you need to select, to always go a level down, because Figma is built up in layers, in levels, and it groups things, similar like groups in Canvas apps, but they have multiple levels. And if I click 3 times, I can go a group lower. And then I have selected this form title. You can also see that here in the tree view that I have selected the title here. And if I click description, it will show me the other, the one below. But if I select the title, and then in the right pane, you will see all of the information on that element on the canvas. And I can see that the width of this is 84, which is just the width of the text. The height of the text box is 24 pixels. And I can see that the size is 18. My text size is 18. So I know that if I'm building a form, I will also use, or I should also use the 18 text size for that. It's bold because it is very, or it should be very apparent. Of course, it's Tegus UI. And I can also see the fill color, which is not just black, it's more a dark gray. So that is also important. If you want to make sure, some components have multiple colors. Let's see if this one does. Yeah, so this component has multiple colors. What I always do, if I'm not sure, because here it is, you can assume, of course, that the white is the background of the button, the gray is the border of the button, which is now not visible because there is this blue selectable indicator that this is the selected component, and this dark one is probably the text. But if you want to be sure of which color or which color value is actually which here on the screen, what you can then do is detach the style, and then you can actually change the color. So I usually set it to red, because then it becomes very visible which color I changed. And then with undo, which is Control+Z on the keyboard, I can just change it back and copy that value to see which it has been. So that's something that I use to make sure that I copy the right color values to the right destination, where it is that they need to be. So here we have an example of a form. If we want to build that form, then we know more or less what is important here. There is also always some guidance. When is it used in a personal app? What does it then look like? If a form is used in a tab, what does it look like? And there is some information on the anatomy. There is a title. If you have an alert, this is what it should look like. If you have the caption, what it should look like. All of that information you can find in that form page over here. Also the behavior, what does it look like if there is success, if the form was saved. If I have an inline error, what should that look like? If there is a page level error, then it should have the alert. And all of that information you can find on here. Theming is also included. So you have the light theme versus a dark theme. What is important for accessibility? All of that information is here. What should the form do if it needs to be responsive? You can go really, really far with the toolkit. I like to use it to, in the beginning, for the first time, I like to use it to just make my application look like it belongs in Teams, and then expand onto that. But you can find all of the information that you would need for an application in the toolkit. And you have these templates for a lot of the things that you might need in an application. So a form when you want to create or edit an item, but then also a list for an overview. Our typical galleries that we showed how can we actually make our galleries look like themes? Also, that is here, because here we have an example of a form with all of the information. What is the color of that separator here? What is the size of one row in our list? All of that information you can find in those templates. So what I do when I am building a screen for an application in a Microsoft Teams that should be in Microsoft Teams, I will go through these templates and I will find the one that is closest to whatever I'm trying to build, or that I can base what I'm trying to build on. If I'm going to build a form, of course I'm going to look at the form. But also if I'm building a landing page for my application, maybe the users don't need to sign in, but they basically have an application with a couple of options, a couple of buttons. If it's not too many buttons and it's not really a dashboard where they see an overview of their information, which is, of course, with some, which could be with some graphs as well. But if it's a landing page, it might not be a dashboard. But I can base that off of the sign-in screen, because this is also like a landing screen. There is some intro and then some options for the user. So that is what I would use for most of my landing screens. So if I'm building a new screen, I'm going to start with the UI templates. And then let's say we are building a form, and zoom back in. I have all of this general information. And so I know that this button, the primary button should be the blurple, and then the normal button, or the not primary, secondary actions, they should be this gray. But what does it do when I hover over it, or when it's pressed, or when it is selected? The same for the toggle. If it's on, it looks like this, but what if the toggle is off? Or my dropdown, what does my dropdown look like when I have it opened? For those details, we go back up and we go to the UI components. So in the UI components, especially in the basic UI components, there is all of that information on all of the controls that you can imagine, or most of the controls that you can imagine using. Let's take a look at our button, for example. What information do we have on the button? And always for the light theme and then the dark theme, we have the sizes, the possible sizes. The default size is medium, so that means that probably the height is fixed, but the width could be different. And I was clicking a couple of times to actually select that button, and always clicking in threes. And when I select that button, then I can see that, oh, okay, so a default button is 32 pixels high. This is width times height. And here you can see it as well. So the height of my button is 32, and then the width can change depending on how much text is in there, but the height will be fixed. And if I don't have that much space, I can also go for a small button, which is then, let me select the button, which is then 24 pixels high. And of course, also the text size will be different. So this is for, again, the sizes for a button at rest. But if I have, I can also have different styles of buttons. So I have that neutral button, I have the accent button. Sometimes I will have an outline button for one that should still be even less conspicuous, and even a ghost button I can have. These are, again, buttons at rest. But what happens when they are in a different state? So I have the accent button at rest, but then on hover, it's a bit more dark. When it's pressed, it's even darker. And then when it's in focus, there is this white border around it. If I zoom in, you can see that better, probably. There is a white border around it when the button is in focus, but not selected. This is useful for when people are using their keyboards to go through the options on the screen. And then, of course, a disabled button is also important. So with this, I can build my buttons, because all of the information is in there to build the button. I know which size I need, I know which styles I have, and then I will have to make sure that I do the same for a button that is neutral. For the hover, I will make it a bit darker, and then for the press, a bit darker still. But the concept is explained here. And for the accent button, I can get that specifically, I can get all of the colors perfectly from here. If we want a different button, so we have a button with a text, but we could also have a button with an icon, or a split button, which has a value and then a drop down to do a different action, for example. What should that look like? So all of the information, if I want to build a button, is in here. So if we take a step back, with the Teams UI kit, the UI toolkit, we start with the general information about the design system. What are the colors that I can use? What size of fonts can I use? What should my components look like in general, like with the I should always size them in multiples of 4 pixels. That's explained in the layout. What should the drop shadow be? All of that information you can find here. If we then are going to build a specific screen, you can get some inspiration from the UI templates section. If I'm building a list, what should that look like in general? A form, my sign on my landing screen, the general layout of one screen you can find in the UI templates. And then when I am designing specific controls, I will take a look at the UI components, and most of the things will be in the basic UI components on how I'm actually going to do those details for those controls. So we have a button here. We also have input, which is text. Input, the scroll bar, if we can change that. How can we do that? What are the checkboxes? What are the possible options for checkboxes? All or a lot of the things that we can do, or a lot of the controls that we can think of, at least all of the controls that I can think of, are in here. So a drop down, a radio. One that is used a lot still is the toggle, which is right next to the radio. So you can find all of that information in here. And that's why I think that the Teams UI Toolkit is a very powerful tool to use when you're building Teams applications. And I also want to show you how you do this, because it can take some time to get used to working with the UI Toolkit. There is a lot of information in there. So how do we actually do this for a Canvas app? And for that, I have created an application, and I'm going to switch to a different browser. There we go. So I have created an application for the users to register if they will be coming to the office or not. And it's called Attendance Registration. This is a Power App. So with a lot of Power Apps for my landing screen, I will show the profile picture of the user. I have already made it one of the purple themes in the studio, in the Canvas App Studio, because I thought, yeah, Teams is purple, but still, this doesn't match. Right, this is a lot lighter purple than the Teams blurple. It's also, I feel like it's more lavender. I have a nice picture, which does have the right blurple color already. And then if I then go to the register your attendance, I have a form where I have my profile picture repeated again. I have my form where I'm actually going to fill in the information, and then I can submit that. Which this application is functional. It will then store information in a SharePoint list. I can have an overview of my attendances, which I am going to the office, or I plan on going to the office next week, Monday, and then the week after. And I can also see what my colleagues are doing, so all attendances. And unfortunately, the pictures don't come through here, but there should be pictures here as well. So I can see that tomorrow 3 people will be at the office. So maybe I can think about, oh, maybe I should go to the office too, so I can talk to Claire, John, and Frank again. So this is a Power App that looks less like a Power App, but still, especially the galleries give it away and the forms give it away. It still looks a lot like a Power App. This doesn't belong. It doesn't seem right. The purple is wrong. My name is repeated here, but I'm already logged into Teams. This might be good for a standalone Power Apps, but not really for an embedded Power App, because I am already logged in. I cannot log in as someone else, so it doesn't make sense that I'm here. My name is, so it just doesn't feel completely right. So I want to improve this. I want to make this more like a Teams application. So for that, I have already, I'm going to open the app in the studio, and I'm going to start by changing my home screen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to delete my profile picture and name, because as I mentioned, I'm already logged into Teams. So I don't need to know that, yeah, it's me. Of course, it should be me. I'm in Teams, single sign-on, right? I don't want to be worried about this, that it could be someone else. So I'm going to delete my name and profile picture. And then I'm going to rearrange the controls so that it looks more like this is my landing screen. And I mentioned it before, if I take a look at the UI templates, the sign-in screen is basically the components that I need. It contains almost exactly the components that I need. I have an image to set the scene, and then I have some options with the 3 buttons that I have here. I have my image and then the 3 buttons with the options. Yeah, I'm going to try to create this, but then maybe with one accent button. If we look at the different buttons, the basic UI components, I want one accent button because the most important thing that people will use this app for is to register an attendance. So I want one accent button. And then the 2 other options, they should be more neutral. So I'm going to rearrange these components so that it looks more like that login screen. And this is where it can be a bit tricky because you have to switch through these screens. So what I like to do is I first like to do the main layout, and then I'm going to focus on the specifics. So to do the main layout, I am going to move my image to the top in the middle and then move my 3 buttons below that. And then I'm going to take a look at the size of this picture just to see what it is. So the picture is 200 high, and close this. And this is explained here in the framework, which is basically which components you can have. And here it says the image can be a maximum of 420 by 200 pixels width and height. So it can be a maximum of 420 wide and 200 high. So I should also make my picture only 200 pixels high and then make sure that the width just follows that. Branded illustrations work best, so that means working with the colors of your brand, and then also consider the look in all themes, themes. So going back to our image, I'm going to change the height of this image to 200, so that it's a lot less high, and I'm going to change the width of it to 420, which will still be too much, but at least if I ever change it and I keep the image position to fit, it will always fit into that grid of 420 by 200. And I'm going to reposition it so that it should be in the middle of the screen, which I cannot seem to find, but I want it to be in the middle. So for that, I am going to change the X value to a formula, which is one that I use often to find, not the height, the width, to find the middle of the screen, which is basically the width of the parent divided by 2 minus my own width divided by 2, because that means that the centers will line up. And then I have simplified that formula a little bit. And now my image is in the middle of the screen. I have also left some white space at the top. And then I'm going to make sure that my 3 buttons align up with the middle of that image as well. Leave some space. And this is the general layout of my screen, of my landing screen. Now for the buttons. Let's go back to our UI toolkit and then go to our basic UI components, where I am going for the buttons. So I already know that the size, select the button and not the text. There we go. The height of my button is 32. And the size of the text inside my button, which was here, should be here somewhere. It's always looking a bit for it. There we go. The size of the text is 14. And the button, as I was, 32. So let's start with that. The font is already correct because I am using, but let's check it anyway. The font is already Segu UI because the theme that I was using earlier is an Office theme, which also uses Teams UI as the font. So let's make sure that the height of my button is 32 and not 54. And the size of the text in my button should be 14. Now, ideally, you want to set these values as variables in the on start and then reuse them so you can easily change them afterwards. But right now, I am not going to do that. I'm just going to show you by changing the values directly in the controls. Let's see. What else do we have? Of course, this button, if I zoom in, you will see this. This button has straight corners, but we figured out that Teams buttons have rounded corners. If we select the button, we will see that the border radius is 4. So we should have that for our button in our app as well. So let's go back to our application and then set the border radius instead of 0 to 4. Nice rounded corners. And then the most visible part of the button will be the color. And this will be the accent color. And I'm just going to get this from my selection, because this is what I have selected. This is the fill, the Teams blurple. And then if I go back to my application, I can change the fill to, because this is a hex value, I will need to use the color value function like this. And now my button looks like a Teams button. If I go to the full screen again, you can see that this looks a lot more like a Teams button than do the other two. So now I need to, of course, this is the rest state, but if I hover over it, it will still have that strange color. So I need to change the on hover color as well, or the hover fill it should be. And for that, I am going to my states section in that button, for that button, and I'm going to do the same thing there. Select until I get to this button and copy my value from the selection color here for that hover button. And then do the same thing with the color value function like this, so that now when I hover, it will be a bit darker, which is not, she doesn't do anything. Did I copy the right thing? Or does it just happen to be the same color? It's always nice to figure these things out. It seems like this is not the rest state because this is a different value. So let's correct that. Fill. Always make sure that you copy the right values and don't make any assumptions. This is what looks better. So if I don't hover over it, I'm pressing the Alt key to do quick testing in the studio. It has the typical Teams blurple. If I hover, it's a bit darker. And then I'm going to do the same for the pressed fill. Let's go for the pressed button and then detach this theme, copy it, and then do the same here with the color value. There we go. And now when I press, it gets darker still. I'm taking a look at the time, and I see that I am running almost out of time. So this is how you can apply this to your own applications by going through the different properties that you have, because I know that I have a fill and a hover fill and a pressed fill. But if you don't know all of the properties, then you can I should select the button. You can open up the properties drop down and then see all of the colors. For example, what is the color of my border, the thickness, and you can see all of the properties that there are. And then you can figure out what that should be from the Teams UI Toolkit, or what that value should be from the Teams UI Toolkit. And you can do this for all of the screens that you have, because I have this home screen, but I also have the registration screen and the galleries. And I cheated a little bit, and I already created this as a beautiful application, or at least a prettier application. And then this is the result. So you can see that I started the same way with the image in the middle. I have also changed the background color of the application to the Teams gray. And this should be full screen. So that is something that I should have changed as well, so that it actually takes the full screen. Much like the Files tab does, for example, it takes the full screen. It's not showing the black borders around my application like it does here, or the darker gray colors. If I then go to the form, book a seat, this looks a lot more like a Teams form. I have the breadcrumb here so that users can go back to the home screen. They can, this is something that I haven't done. I haven't changed the theme values actually, so that the calendar matches in more better. But I can I can register to go to the office tomorrow. We do get lunch at the office, so I can indicate whether I want to get lunch or not. And then optionally, I can also provide a reason for statistics, but not that this will be shared with everyone. So I'm just going to connect with some colleagues, because remember earlier I saw that 3 of my colleagues were at the office tomorrow. I can then cancel or submit, and you can see that here the colors are exactly the Teams ones. If I hover and if I press, it's exactly like Teams button. If I click submit, my form will be submitted, and I should go back to the home screen, but I don't. If I then go to your attendances, then I will see that a new attendance has been added, and I can see that this looks a lot more like the list should look in Teams instead of a typical gallery, because it's using everything in one row, and it's using those it's using icons and then the headers for the columns. So it looks a lot more like a Teams application. And then the same goes for the all attendances, where next to my own attendances, I can also see that, yes, indeed, my 3 colleagues will be there. But then next week when I'm going, and the week after when I'm going, no one has registered yet. So maybe I should talk to some people about also coming to the office. And I can see all of that information. And this looks a lot more like an application that was built for Teams. Of course, there are a lot of things that could still be added, like the drop shadows surrounding the buttons. Maybe this list could be a little more to the top instead of in the middle of the screen. But this already looks a lot better, in my opinion, than what I had here, with the wrong purple, and then with the typical Power Apps header, and I am here, but I am also here. Like, how many times do I need to know that it's me who is logged in? Not that many times, at least. So let's go back to the presentation for a minute, so that we can finish off. I have given a demo. Oh, that's right. I wanted to show something else as well. Because of course this is now for a small application, a couple of screens, but to show you that this can actually be done really well, I want to quickly share or give a shout out to an application that I built that you can find on GitHub. It's open source. It's Provision Genie. It's also a Canvas app, but it doesn't look like a Canvas app at all anymore, which helps you provision Teams. The good thing is about this application, you can find it on GitHub through the website provisiongenie.com. And then you can download the application and actually play with all of those components. We have added drop shadows around the buttons here, or around the the cards here. We have forms that look exactly like a Teams form. We have a checkout page with a pop-up that looks like a Teams pop-up. So you can have a much deeper look into these components and how they are built if you want to. But then let's finish off with the resources. So how can you actually get started? I will share this afterwards. I have added a link to that Microsoft Docs page with all of the links for designing your app with UI templates. I've also added a direct link to that Figma page for the Microsoft Teams UI kit. I have taken that illustration off of the landing screen from Undraw, which is a website that is available online where you can find simple illustrations. And the good thing is that you can change the color of those illustrations. So most of them are gray, but then you can decide, if we take a look at this application, you can decide what these, everything that is here, that is blurple here, you can decide the color of what that looks like so that it fits into your color scheme, so that it fits your brand, which is a very nice thing, I think. Here we need to go. I haven't blogged about this yet, but I will blog about it soon on my personal blog. So you can, if you want to, you can follow me on Twitter so that you can get an update on that. And I'm toying with the idea of actually doing a series on for the specific controls, like how do I get a button to look like themes? How do I get a drop down to look like themes? And what are the limitations in Canvas? Because there are some. And then a tip that I wanted to give you is if you want to play with that drop shadow or other effects that you cannot get with the out-of-the-box components, the HTML text control is your go-to control to do those kinds of things. Because in the HTML text control, you can add CSS for amazing effects like that drop shadow. That is what we are using in Provision Genie as well. Thank you very much. If you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them now.
Hey, Carmen, thank you for that. One person asked that they just see you have 3 Teams icons on your taskbar, and they were just wondering that, do you run different tenants for each, or how is that done?
Yes. So I have indeed different Teams icons on my taskbar. The way that I do it is, let me go here. It's been a while. But I'm using the new Edge browser, which is very important because in the new Edge browser, you can actually install a tab or a site as an application. So if I do this for this tenant, which I haven't done it for yet, then you will see that I can give the name or give the application a name. I can click install. And then a new browser window opens, and then I have that Teams icon here in the top right corner, and this is basically my Edge website, but then as a tab, so I don't have the URL bar anymore here at the top or any other tabs. And then I can simply right-click and pin this application to the taskbar to have it at my disposal at all times. So these are indeed different, 3 different tenants that I have to use often. My one, and then the one that I work on with Louisa on Provision Genie with, and then one of my customers that I have to get to often. So that is how I have done that. So the new Edge is really a good tool for that.
Perfect. Someone else asked, how do you use icons?
How do you use icons? I'm not sure what is meant by that. I use icons a lot in my applications. If I take a look at your attendances, you can. I have added the icons here at the top. So I use them to give some more information or to add a bit of, because this is a person icon, so this is the name of the person, the calendar for the date. So to give a bit more context. Where I get them from is another question, of course. These ones I got from the typical, from the built-in Power Apps icons, but there are Fluent UI icons, which there is a link in the toolkit. Let's see here, icons, in the Fluent icons, and then you can open that file. You can, I think you can download them from here. If you duplicate this, then you should be able to download them also from here. And if the question is, how do I get them into the app? Now that I'm starting to answer the question, I'm thinking that might be the actual question. It's by inserting an image, and then instead of uploading an image like this, you would just upload your icon image. So it's not like an icon in Canvas apps where you can, oh yeah, this is an icon, of course. So it will not be added as an icon that you can select here, that you can choose a different icon, or it will not be added here. But if you want to add any icons that are not built in, it would just be by adding an image and then uploading the icon as an image to your application.
Perfect.
I hope that answered the question.
Then someone else, I think this is a follow-on to the first question. They just said HTML and CSS. Does that work for the desktop version of Teams?
Really? Okay, that's news to me. I will have to check that with Louisa, who I built this application with, because we are using it also for our solution. I have to admit, I always tested this in the browser. So that's a good feedback. We should look into that. I'm going to write this down because this is important and good to know. If this is true, then you all know it doesn't work in the desktop app.
Perfect. And as someone else said, I hope she can share the slides. So if you wish to send them to me, I could attach them with webinar recording, or if you want to tweet them, I can retweet that as well, whatever works for you.
I'll do both. I'll share them and then I will tweet them as well. Yep.
Yep, perfect. And I think that's all the questions, unless anyone else wants to get one in there quick, because we still have a few more minutes, or if there's anything else you want to say before you finish up.
Not on my side. No, thank you for joining the webinar. I hope you enjoyed it. As I mentioned, I will share my my socials and my blog once more. You can always reach out to me on Twitter @Carmen. You can find my blog on digipersonal.com. And if you are interested in the solution that I shared, Provision Genie, you can find that on provisiongenie.com, which I should have added on the slide as well.
Perfect. Thanks, Carmen. Thanks for your time today and delivering a great webinar for us. We appreciate it.
Thank you. It was fun. Thank you for having me.
Good. And then to everyone else, thanks for attending, and hope everyone has a good rest of their day. And just to remember, if anyone's feeling unlucky, scan the QR code to enter Veeam's competition to win one of €200 Amazon vouchers. So that's it for today. Thanks again to Carmen, and have a great day, everyone.